What if a nuclear war could continue even after a country's leaders were gone? That's not a sci-fi movie plot. It's the very real Cold War system the West called the Dead Hand. In Russia, it was known as perimeter. Today, we're reopening the vault on this Doomsday machine to explain how it worked and why it terrified everyone. Before we dive in, do me a huge favor and tap that subscribe and like button. It helps the channel more than you know. I'm trying to turn this into my first real project, and every single click from you powers the next video. Thanks for that. Alright, let's get into it. The core of nuclear strategy is deterrence. And deterrence is simple. Your enemy has to be absolutely certain you can hit back, no matter what. In the early 1980s, the Soviet Union had a deep fear of a decapitation strike. Imagine one swift, clean punch aimed directly at their command bunkers. Cables cut, antennas vaporized, phones dead. If no one could give the order, their massive missile arsenal would sit silent in its silos. Perimeter was the answer to that nightmare. Now, the Dead Hand wasn't some killer robot from a movie. It was a complex system that required humans to arm it during a crisis. Once armed, the system would watch the country for real physical signs of a nuclear attack. It wasn't looking at radar screens. It was looking for blast shocks traveling through the ground. It was scanning for massive spikes in radiation. It was detecting the electromagnetic pulses that nuclear explosions create. At the very same time, it was constantly checking if it could still communicate with the military's chain of command. Could it reach the general staff? Could it get a signal to the strategic rocket forces? If the system detected that the nation was under nuclear fire and the leadership was completely offline, it would move to its final, chilling step. This final step involved a special command missile. This missile wasn't designed to blow up a city. It didn't even carry a nuclear warhead. Instead, it carried a powerful radio transmitter. Once launched, it would climb to a high altitude, soaring over the vast expanse of the Soviet Union. From that vantage point in the sky, it would broadcast encrypted launch orders to every silo, submarine, and mobile launcher across the country. Now, why use a missile for this? Because a nuclear exchange absolutely shreds ground-based communications. Radio towers fall, fiber optic cables burn, and electronics are fried. A transmitter flying high above the chaos can still reach everyone at once. Think of perimeter as a system of gates, a final voice for a dying nation. Gate 1 was human authorization. Leaders had to decide to switch the system on. Gate 2 was physical proof. The system needed to sense multiple real nuclear detonations on Soviet soil. Gate 3 was a communications check, a total loss of contact with the top command. And finally, Gate 4 was one last human check. A duty officer, located in a super-hardened, deep underground bunker, had to give a final approval. Only if all 4 of these gates were passed would the command missile launch, broadcasting the codes that would unlock the country's devastating second strike. So why build something so extreme, so apocalyptic? Because both sides had terrifyingly close calls that proved the system was fragile. In 1979, a training tape was accidentally loaded into a NORAD computer, making it look like a massive Soviet launch was underway. In 1980, a single failed computer chip worth less than $1 triggered another false alert of an incoming attack. Then, in 1983, a Soviet early warning satellite mistook the glint of sunlight off high-altitude clouds for the engine plumes of American missiles. A Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, had to make a gut-wrenching judgment call that it was a false alarm, and he held his fire, likely saving the world. Later that same year, NATO conducted a military exercise called Able Archer 83. It was so realistic that some leaders in Moscow became convinced it was a cover for a real first strike. These scares proved a hard, uncomfortable truth. Humans make mistakes, and machines make mistakes. Perimeter was an attempt to lower the risk of an accidental war by requiring hard, physical evidence of an attack, and by keeping a human in the loop until the very end. On a normal day, orders flowed through a system called Kazbek, using the famous nuclear briefcases called Cheget, carried by top leaders. Commands went from the leadership to the rocket forces and down to each individual launch crew. But a first strike could sever that chain in seconds. Perimeter existed solely for that worst-case scenario. Special receivers at launch sites were always listening for short, coded phrases broadcast at specific times. If the right message came through from the command missile and local checks passed, the crews were authorized to execute their pre-planned retaliatory strikes. From the American perspective, Perimeter completely killed the fantasy of a clean, winnable nuclear war. It meant that even if you managed to hit every single command bunker, every leader, and every antenna, that second punch was still coming. That reality dramatically raised the cost of starting a war. In a cold, logical way, it probably made a first strike less likely. But it also introduced a new nightmare, the possibility that the last order given on Earth would come from a machine, speaking to the ashes of burnt cities. Soviet engineers understood this paradox and tried to build in strict limits. The system needed a human to arm it. It relied on multiple physical sensors, not just fallible radar. It had a final human check before activation, and the command missile only sent orders. It didn't choose the targets itself. They were desperately trying to build a system that guaranteed retaliation without causing an accidental apocalypse. They wanted certainty without panic. Of course, nothing is perfect in the chaos of war, but the design tried to stack the odds in favor of control. So, was Perimeter real? Was it ever actually active? According to open sources and the accounts of former Soviet military officers, the answer is yes. It was operational by the mid-1980s. A modernized version of it likely exists today, not as a doomsday machine, but as a last resort communications network. The core idea, however, hasn't changed. Assured retaliation is what keeps deterrence stable. If both sides know for a fact that a response is guaranteed, the temptation to shoot first practically disappears. The key lessons from Perimeter are fascinating. It shows that in modern warfare, communications can be just as important as the warheads themselves. It proves that backup systems are critical for when the main network inevitably dies. And it highlights how clear, strict rules of engagement can reduce the chance of catastrophic decisions under extreme pressure. Perimeter was brutal, it was simple, and it was laser-focused on one job: making sure the second strike could still happen if the worst happened first. Now, let's clear up some common myths about the dead hand. Myth number 1. It was a fully automatic, sentient system. The reality is that humans had to arm it, and a human officer had to approve the final step. Myth number 2. It could launch the entire Soviet arsenal all by itself. The reality is that it only sent enabling codes that unlocked pre-existing plans. The individual silos and launch crews still had to be operational to carry out the orders. Myth number 3. It made war more likely. The reality is that by removing any potential benefit of a decapitation strike, it almost certainly lowered the overall risk of nuclear war. The dead hand system is a true paradox. It was a terrifying machine built for the express purpose of preventing war by making a first strike utterly pointless. At the same time, it pushed the world closer to a place where a machine might have the final say in the ruins of civilization. That is the dark, unsettling shadow of nuclear strategy. We build these incredible, powerful tools that we hope we never, ever have to use. We layer backups on top of backups. And in the end, we just have to trust that cool heads and clear signals will keep these silent guardians exactly that: silent. If this breakdown helped you understand the real story behind the dead hand, please hit that like and subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. Cold War myths? A deep dive on missile silos? The history of early warning satellites? Your idea might just become the next upload. Thanks so much for watching. You are helping me grow this channel, one episode at a time.